Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
All right, everyone. Check-ins. There's like this energy right here in the middle of my chest. I don't know if it's nervous energy, but it's something going on there, and I can't put a name on it yet. Um, and I was a little bit tired before I said that, but now I'm a little bit energetic. So glad I did that check-in. Welcome to the Stoa. I am Peter Limberg, the steward of the Stoa, and the Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this very moment. And today is the Coaches in Resonance launch party. This will be about a 60-minute session. It might go a little bit over, and it's going to be filled with conversations and various exercises. And the idea here is to have this sort of as an info sesh of what to expect from this kind of Coaches in Residence series, but in a fun sort of interactive way. So what is the series? So for about a month and a half, it's a month and a half long experiment, which ends at the end of February. There will be three coaches, AJ Bond, the shame educator, Tyson Wagner, the flow guide, who are both facilitators at the Stoa, basically since this place started, and myself, the daemon whisperer. And we'll talk about what these things mean in a moment, because I know they're lean on the jazzy title side. And the idea, or the initial idea of this experiment, is to have a coach situated at the digital colonnade of the Stoa. And perhaps it's a rotating thing. There's maybe a rotating series of coaches. Maybe there's an ecology of coaches that form here. And it's ideally that they interact with the wisdom gym somehow eventually, because we have all these cool kind of breath work, collective presencing. There might be a meditation class coming soon. So it's like the coach can kind of help guide people in the wisdom gym ecology one day. And maybe there's a meta game, mastermind psychotech too, that could be we can interact with. So that's sort of a high level idea of what this is. And for today, I'm going to hand it over to AJ in a moment. And then after that, the three of us are going to talk about what we do in our kind of coaching practice and have a conversation with each other, open up to Q&A, and then we'll end with an exercise. So that's what's in store for us today. And with that being said, I will hand it over to AJ, who's currently muted. And also, you can unmute yourself now, my friend.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so as Peter said, I am AJ Bond. I'm going to say more about my actual coaching offering in a moment, but we wanted to start off with an exercise, and I've been toying with this one, so we're going to try it out. It'll just be a thought experiment that we're going to do for 1 or 2 minutes. And it's inspired by a theme that's really alive for me in coaching around wanting to inspire people to eventually be their own self-coach and self-healer. So I want to invite you to tap into your own inner wisdom in a kind of unusual, perhaps embarrassing way. And that is, I want you to start off by thinking of something, maybe an animal or a fictional character that you think is absolutely adorable. Maybe it's Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, or maybe it's Baby Groot, or maybe it's an actual child, the delightful child that you know in your own life, or maybe it's a puppy or a kitten or something, or a Pokemon. Just like take a moment and see if you can find this adorable little animal that just really delights you. So you've all got your adorable little animal. And we're going to look at that animal as your sidekick. They follow you everywhere, like Baby Yoda with the Mandalorian. This is your sidekick today. And they're always with you, and sometimes you're protecting them. But today, there's going to be a role reversal. And your adorable sidekick is actually going to support you. So I want you to next think of a challenge in your life. Maybe it's something that you are having to do soon that you're afraid of, or maybe it's a situation that's brought up a lot of shame for you, and it's just something that you're like currently actually struggling with. So just take a moment to see if you can touch into some situation like that. Now, in this moment of connecting with that difficult situation or that difficult emotion, your adorable little sidekick notices you feeling this struggle, and they climb out of their adorable little nest or whatever it is that they live in, and they come over to you. And in your imagination, they give you the most adorable, but like wise and uplifting pep talk. So if it's Baby Yoda or some other animal, suddenly they have a voice, and it's this like really adorable voice. And I want all of you to take a moment and act out what your sidekick says to you in this moment. And to facilitate that, I encourage you to turn your video off. Turn your video off, and you just have 1 or 2 minutes with yourself wherein you give yourself this adorable pep talk from your sidekick. So your 2 minutes starts now. And if you're watching at home on YouTube, feel free to play along in your own time. That was my adorable voice, but now I'm going to mute myself. So I encourage you to wind down your pep talk. Your little adorable sidekick has made his or her or its point, and they waddle off or fly away into their little cubby or wherever they live. And you now have the inspiration and support to potentially confront this issue with more self-empowerment. And so when you are ready, I encourage you to turn your video back on. And the reason that I like this kind of exercise is because it can trigger a little bit of shame. Like, you overheard me say cute, and I was like, oh, shame for showing vulnerability and cuteness. So it plays with shame, which I like. And it sort of raises the question of, why is that so shameful? But on the other hand, if you really lean into it, it can be a deep source of releasing oxytocin in your brain, which is a neurotransmitter related to bonding, trust, like coziness. So when you are feeling shame or fear, actually like doing some imaginal work around adorable, cute, sidekick type stuff really can give you like a sense of warmth and safety. So that's, if that was interesting for you, then I encourage you to play with a little cutesy baby voice with yourself sometimes. So that's all I have for now.
Mine looked like little AJ was sitting right here giving me love and advice. All right. So what we're going to do now, we are going to just go around kind of a round table with AJ, Tyson, and myself, just kind of explaining briefly, like a minute to 3 minute, what our coaching practice entails. And then we're going to engage in a three-way conversation. And then we'll pivot to the Q&A. So I think it would be good that our flow guide, Tyson Wagner, goes first and chats a little bit about what he has in store.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Thank you, AJ. I actually, early on practicing freestyle, just something I'm going to talk about a little bit here, around a campfire with friends, I noticed this like really tender sort of baby voice that I would sometimes rap in, especially when someone was playing acoustic guitar and it was really like warm, cozy vibes. So it just has me pondering that, like, why is it that emerged for me, that to play that character in that voice at a time where I felt so so vulnerable, so open to making mistakes. And so I just thought that was an interesting connection. And it brings me to my practice, my life practice, which has become a group practice and a coaching practice, which is freestyle. Not necessarily freestyle rap, but freestyle self-expression. Expressing ourselves in an artful way without knowing what it is that we're going to do or say. And a warm embrace of awkwardness and discomfort and uncertainty for me has been a practice in just becoming, that has made me more comfortable and confident with making mistakes and embarrassing myself and looking silly. And freestyle rap has been a real pillar of that. And so what I'm inviting people into is an experience, an experiment where you'll use your voice and your words, your emotions, your playfulness to express yourself in a way that is sort of edgy. Yeah, where we find the edge of your comfort zone and we push beyond it. But it's taken a lot of different forms. I've found that freestyle rap has become a sort of practice comparable to psychoanalysis. When I start to freestyle for a good period of time, I will say things that seem to be bubbling up from within that are in my unconscious that I didn't know were there, that are interesting, that I might take more of a look at. And most of all, I think with freestyle, what it is that's happening is I'm learning to wield a tool that I can invite groups of people into to a space where it is safe to not play it safe. Like a place where people give themselves permission to express in a way where like the dangerous thing might be said, whether it's about themselves, it might risk or ruin their own reputation. It might just be an edgy emotion for them to express. So for me, what that's been is like playing aggressive trap beats and freestyling like some sort of sick monster. Now that doesn't sound like, whoa, that sounds a little edgy, but there is something that a hardcore hip hop artist from a rough neighborhood that they got to experience, that freestyle or hip hop ciphers help them to channel and experience and express, that I can see and like, ooh, there's something there that like there's a form of expression that I haven't touched yet. There's a part of me that can live through by using music and artful expression. And so we kind of find those, like, what are the emotions for you? Is it like being a tender, cute little character, or is it being intense and dark and expressing rage? Finding those different spots of expression that are challenging to get to, but you know you want to get there. And we use music to help that come alive. And then it's a series of games and exercises that can help us build up from a place of like testing the waters and just playing with the discomfort to really giving ourselves to a freestyle, seeing if we can come into a place of surrendered flow state. So that's sort of a riff on an intro. Yeah, thanks for asking, Peter.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. First, the statement. I'm reminded of my acting background when I was taking acting classes and how you have to really embody a certain character, and that was like surprisingly therapeutic when you don't have the opportunity to express that emotion. And I imagine this practice has a similar quality to it. So if someone's interested in signing up for it for a session, like an hour session, I think is the limit. What would they expect?
Yeah, great. So the first 10 minutes or so would be us having a conversation. I want to know things like, when is it that you feel most in flow? When is it that you feel least in flow? When do you feel most critical? When is your filtering mechanism for what it is that you can and can't say the strongest? And just learning. And when is it the weakest? When are your inhibitions mostly relaxed? Having a conversation about some of those things, finding out why are you attracted to freestyle? I've had some people, it's because they're singers and songwriters and they want to bring freestyle into their writing practice. For others, they just want to be more comfortable improving in a conversation. I used to stand in a room, and if there was someone that I wanted to talk to, I wouldn't have the confidence to go and talk to them until I had a really good freaking plan. Now, I'm making a practice of just using, well, freestyle it as a mantra. All you got to do is say the first word. So finding out just what is it that attracts you to this practice. And then we play some flow games. We ease in to an experience of freestyle. We set a 30-minute container so you know precisely how long the experiment is going to last. It's going to end in 30 minutes. And we'll practice different expression games. And some people I've done this experience with are quite shy and remain shy until the end. But had an experience of getting to explore more of their voice and self-expression and give them something to work on and aspire to. Others might be more expressive, but they have something specific that they want to feel into or channel. So really, the experience can be designed to meet you where you're at. But I've recognized in myself that sort of personal moments of transformation can happen in a second, in a moment, by saying the first word, by opening up and expressing something. I can have a visceral experience of forever being more comfortable to express myself because of this moment. And so hopefully we'll create a moment where you leave the experience with something that has been shifted for you, that gives you more freedom to express yourself in whatever the context is. And then we'll close out after 30 minutes with just a closing dialogue. Yeah.
Very cool. And if people want to get a taste of this in a public way, where can they find you, Tyson?
Yeah, we're practicing Diaflogos at the Stoa on Sundays. So that's a very low barrier to entry place. We're taking freestyle rap and dialogue, those two modalities, and blending them together. So imagine just having a conversation in the spirit of freestyle. Sometimes it gets musical, but there's no pressure to be musical. And then I also have a practice group called Flowing with Unknowingness on Wednesdays. You can learn more about that at tysonflows.com. And that's more around creative self-expression, practicing freestyle rap. So it's an opportunity to take the practice a bit deeper, but I'd recommend Diaflogos as a start.
Very cool. And I remember when Tyson first presented this idea, when the Stoa first started, I never heard freestyle rap or this sort of medium of expression be repurposed towards sense making and then have that kind of being confident with speaking one's truth in everyday life. So I'm quite excited where this is going to go. And another fine gentleman who's been here from the beginning, the Shame Breakthrough Bootcamp, AJ Bond, our shame educator. AJ, could you tell us a little bit about your coaching practice?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks, Tyson. So I just thought I would start off by giving a little background. About 5 or 6 years ago, I had this transformative experience, not literally in therapy, but kind of inspired by my therapist, who was the first person to say, I think what you're talking about all the time, AJ, is shame. And that was like, what? No, really? And he just was like, well, Brene Brown says that shame is, I feel like I'm a bad person. And guilt is, I feel like I did a bad thing. Like, which side of that dialectic are you? And I was like, oh, the bad person side. And I just started like voraciously reading all Brene Brown and then like all shame. And there was just this like moment one day in my living room where I finally took shame from being me. Like this is the Keegan subject object shift. It was like my shame became an object and it wasn't me. And suddenly I could see it separate, and I could see how it was being fueled by my culture and my relationships and my family and my inability to kind of separate from it. And as soon as I made that shift, like I just experienced bliss for like, literally I was blissed out for a month because I realized I don't have to be what all those different forces are telling me to be. I can be AJ, whatever that is. And it was so transformative that I was like, I need to share this with people. And so since that time, I've been on this like shame quest to both learn everything I can about my shame and other people's shame, which it turns out it can be quite different, and to share it with as many different people as I can. So to that end, I ended up doing a certification at this place called the Center for Healing Shame in Berkeley. I didn't even know this existed until like a year ago. So I just finished my certification the end of last year, and I just finished writing a book about my whole shame journey. And so I'm now very much in a place where I feel competent to share it with people in a coaching environment, as opposed to Shame Breakthrough Bootcamp or just casual conversation. And the sessions, basically we start with a connect to self moment, which is just to get grounded in our bodies, because though shame is attached to a lot of disempowering thoughts, at its root, it's a feeling. And so that's really important. And then for some people, the session starts where we just talk about shame in general. And I do what I call shame ed and give them a sense of shame, what it is, how it works. And usually there's sort of a moment where they're like, oh, I've experienced that. And they like bring in a story. And then we unpack that story using like the tools of shame ed, which again can be very powerful because you're not the shame. It's an object. It has its own kind of logic and cultural influences. And to dissect it in that framework can be really liberating and allow you to manage your shame in a much more healthy way, rather than be controlled by it or trying to avoid it all the time. Other people come with a very specific thing in mind, and I use the shame ed tools to basically give them, first of all, empathy. It's a space where you can basically tell me anything. And people have told me, really intense things that bring up shame. And so it's just an opportunity to really be seen and accepted for whatever you've been through. So like empathy is a big component, being seen. And then we try to like shift that experience and reframe that shame and find ways where they can just have more management and workability around that issue. And there's different tools and techniques to do that. Sometimes it's imagination work, like what we did at the beginning of this session. A lot of it's just like really practical advice around how to manage shame more effectively. So it's a bit of a choose your own adventure, but the intention is to have you feel really empathized with, seen, understood, give you some real like shame ed advice, like stuff that has worked for me around managing shame. And then the final piece, which connects back to the beginning again, is that it's all about empowering you, because I cannot heal someone else's shame. That's like an oxymoron to me. So it's very much about how do I get someone in a place where they're able to self-direct how they deal with the world saying you should be like this or you have to do that. That's very much like shame telling us how to be. And when we empower ourselves to be our own kind of decision maker, it really transforms our relationship with shame. So that's something that I want to try to like meet you in and be equals in managing your shame together. So that's what I have.
And I know you have a book coming out soon. I think it's already finished and it's going to be released in a couple months, I think, or in the summer. August, yeah.
August, yeah.
Yeah, and could you touch a little bit on that and maybe how that's related to the practice?
Yeah, the book started off sort of my personal journey with shame, and it's intended to be quite lighthearted. It's called Discomfortable, and I also do a podcast called Discomfortable that's about my experiences with shame and interviewing other people around shame and related topics. But the book, I wrote it all last year, was just such a blessing in that, like, I had all this learning, but until I kind of synthesized it out of me into a book, I wasn't really in a position to like teach or coach as clearly and succinctly as I can now. So I feel like the book was a means of taking a jumble and tons of learnings and just like really crystallizing, these are the things that I think are really helpful when it comes to managing shame in an empowering way.
And the last question I have is, one thing I quite like about you, AJ, is there's no feeling of judgment coming from you. Even though you might be judging internally on and off, but there's no feeling of that when I'm interacting with you in our conversations. And I suspect that you're like learning the language of shame, which you have over the last years, have given you a degree of compassion, and like really, like you're really like socially discerning. In a social situation, you spot things. I'm like, oh, this guy's on it. So I'm curious what your kind of education in shame has taught you in these ways that you didn't expect in a social dynamic.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really appreciate that compliment. Yeah, for me, judgment is like shame. It's an object, and when it comes up, it's not me. So I'm able to disidentify from it and even talk about it. Be like, oh, this judgment came up. I don't even agree with it, but this is from my childhood or something. So that really helps, that space between me and all these objects that try to influence me. And then I just like, once you start to understand shame, it's like, oh, it'd be so easy for me to say this instead of that. And this could cause shame, but this is much less likely to. And it's just like, why would I not want to be spreading essentially like bids for connection and belonging with people? Like, that's what we all really want, I think, as a social animal. Below all of our strategies and schemes, it's like, I just want to belong with other people that I feel an impulse to belong with. And so I am now really able to see when people are making those bids without even necessarily realizing it. And you just give them a bit of attention and say, I see you, and I like what I see. Like, cool. It's the, when someone is asking for money on the street, if you just give them a moment of your time, it's always really appreciated. And it's like those little beats that you get from understanding how shame is motivating us to socially cohere. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It does. And I guess the last question is if someone wants a taste of this in a public way, you have a session every Thursday. Would you like to mention that?
Yeah. So Shame Breakthrough Bootcamp at the Stoa happens Thursdays at 6 p.m. EST every week. And those are just a kind of like fun tip of the iceberg for the kinds of topics that I'm interested in around shame. And the podcast is also a great place to learn more about my thoughts around shame.
And AJ is a workshop machine. I don't know how you do it each week, my friend, but it's quite fun being at the Shame Breakthrough Bootcamp. So yeah, I will talk about mine now, the Daemon Whisperer. Yeah, I'll be honest, like AJ and Tyson had such cool names, like the Flow Guide and then the Shame Educator. I'm like, I gotta have something jazzy. And there's a part of me that regrets calling myself the Daemon Whisperer because the the coaching sessions I've had so far has been quite wild, and people are coming from all over the place with all sorts of different kind of needs and wants and pain points and expectations. So perhaps it might be prudent for me to change that name to set expectations. But essentially, as I put in the bio of the coaching profile, there's three components that I could switch to. The one that is a default is philosophical counseling. So I had a lot of high level, I guess, therapy and help in my day. As people know, Jordan Peterson was my therapist, and then Andrew Taggart, who's a philosophical counselor and a mentor of mine. And essentially, his methodology is what I use not only in this, that's my default in the practice, but I use it with everyone really. And I'll kind of like double click on that in a moment. But then I have I'm probably like an autodidact with coaching and psychotherapeutic tools, and I lean on a lot of them, like coaching, priest therapy. So there's that coaching thing. And I would say the expertise would be in interpersonal skills, interpersonal dynamics. I'm a trainer, a Dale Carnegie training, and I have a lot of experience with that. And out of so I've had about, I think, 10 sessions booked so far since we launched this thing, and all my whole February is booked. So I might have to add new sessions, but there'd be very little interpersonal skills have been touched so far. Some coaching, but most of it's the philosophical counseling. And my tagline, I should have read all the other taglines, but my tagline is listen to what is most alive to come alive. And it's basically the same process when I journal to myself, when I have that conversation with myself, and when I have a conversation with someone else, is just sort of hold space to what is most existentially salient, what is most alive, whether it's something that's exciting that you want to unpack, maybe a golden shadow or a pain point that is usually a pain point, something that you don't want to avoid, but it's at the edge of consciousness, and then you just want to have space to be held for it. So finding that kind of like what's existentially salient, what is most alive, and just kind of sniffing. That's like, I'm a very visceral beast. So it's like you sniff that energy, that sense of aliveness, where that demonic flow goes, and then just gauge in, dialectic, or depending on who you're with, obviously. And that's essentially what the default practice is. And it's the process of discovering itself. It's going to be modified. Perhaps I have to change the name. But it's been quite, dare I say, delicious so far. And each conversation I've had, it felt like there's that something that occurred, and we left somewhere good. So that is my practice in a nutshell. And what we're going to do now is throw your questions in the chat if you have any questions for any of us or all of us. And while you're doing that, the three of us will engage in a three-way conversation about maybe our experience right now, or experience so far, and what we're hoping for the practice. So I guess the first question I'll have for both AJ and Tyson, feel free to field it, whoever. How's it going so far with the coaching practice?
I can say something quickly. And for me, it's going really well. And what I appreciate most about it is that situated in the gift economy model, and here at the Stoa, where I find people are willing to take risks and experiment, suspend judgment and skepticism, and give themselves to an experience and really like go for it and give it their all. I'm really feeling quite safe and empowered to experiment and try new things, take risks. And I just feel ultra grateful for that, because I'm learning so much. And I find that I have sort of a toolkit of comfortable things to fall back on. Like, yeah, typically every time that I do this game or this exercise, it goes well. And so it's nice to have that. But a lot of my most memorable moments where I'm like, okay, that session was epic, and I just leave feeling like it went really well, are often the places where I was also at my edge. Like I was embodying through the teaching and through the facilitation, the thing that I'm inviting the participant to embody, which is taking risks and putting myself at the edge of expression. And so it's just been really neat to notice that sort of mirror effect. And if I ever come in too confident or feeling too comfortable, then it's almost like that's a red flag. Like, oh, you're like, if my plan is too strong, then it might be time to throw myself a curveball. And so it's been fun to just kind of be discerning and experiment with that.
Yeah, for me, I resonated with a lot of what you just said, Tyson. It's been hugely, I've learned a lot, particularly because the Stoa sessions, it's like all first sessions, pretty much. I've had a few repeats now, but first sessions are such a challenge because you don't know the person, you have no idea where they're coming from or what they're going to say. And you kind of have to develop this like faith that you've done enough work that something will come up from you, between you, that will be useful. And so it's just like this openness of like, okay, bring your thing. And like, I hope that something comes out of me that is helpful to you. And it always does. It's always like, oh, there is something. And that has been hugely like exciting and scary, but also like rewarding and reassuring that, oh, that you've amassed enough things that there's just like a tool that pops up when you need it. And that has given me a lot of confidence. And sometimes I find myself like saying something, being like, oh my goodness, and this applies to me like last week. And I'm like learning, it's similar to writing a book. Saying it, getting it out of your brain to someone is just so helpful to clarify what it is that you actually think. So it's been like hugely rewarding for me as well. How's it been for you, Peter?
Yeah, I was telling you both before we log on here. It's been a wild ride because it's like I have people who are like professional coaches, consultants coming. Someone wanted to interview me. Someone wanted to talk about the culture war. So it's coming all the different angles that I didn't expect. But one thing that resonated with both of you said, what Tyson said, and something I think was on your bio, AJ, is just being transparent, right? That radical transparency. And that's, I think, what makes a Stoa special, is that we're talking this through while we're doing it and not appearing to be epistemic authorities in anything. And it's like a place to fuck up in the right way, for everyone, for the coach, for the person in the session. And it's like, you got to really bring yourself in it, like Tyson was saying, in an embodied way, or people will sniff it. They will smell the phoniness. And I remember one session, it was like, for whatever reason, the dynamic that was at play, I got a little stiff in my body, and I started going like epistemic authority mode. And I started like bringing all my coaching tools and stuff like that. And it just didn't feel aligned to the spirit of this whole project and to that session. And I wasn't in service to him. And just calling that out gently, in such a way that it unlocked insights for both of us, because he felt he was holding himself in such a way that dynamic created, and that led to a very interesting discussion. Yeah, so I'll pause there, see if anything comes alive for you two.
I have another question directed at you, Peter, and it's if you notice a pattern in people that you've worked with, or just in sensing the daemon being alive in others, is there something that people frequently have to give up or let go of, sacrifice, to have a stronger connection with their genius, their daemon, that creative spirit?
You know, I don't have a fancy like meta pattern for this, but this is the first thing that comes up. And I'm leaning a lot on Samuel Berge's live player, dead player dichotomy, because I find it quite helpful. And just to restate it here, is a live player is someone who can create something in the world, or an institution, or a person that can create something in the world that hasn't been seen before, or they haven't created before. Where a dead player has to operate on scripts that, you know, they learn. It's like kind of like an improv actor versus like a scripted actor. And I find something that sort of boxes people up and that doesn't allow that energy to flow through is sort of scripts that they borrowed, that weren't their own, that might have been in service towards being effective in an institution or at school or whatever, but it doesn't apply in the wildness of life. And then just releasing those scripts and all the emotions that come along with it, the fear, the anxiety, and not having the right relationship with those. And then that's where my stoicism comes in, to help kind of build right relationship with all these scary emotions. So if there was a meta pattern that will form, it's something about holding on to certain scripts that form like an intellectual architecture that box you in, that make you a dead player, and not having the best relationship with certain emotions, or having the opportunity to even feel those emotions in such a way that you can build a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I have issues with the live player, dead player languaging because of the potential shame of considering yourself a dead player. But I essentially agree to the sense that the dead player is adopting these scripts because shame is saying fit in, fit in, fit in, fit in, fit in. And that's shame's job. And fitting in helped us survive for millions of years. So I want to like really normalize that. Like, of course, I want to follow all these scripts. But then there's just like you say, Peter, there's this opportunity to be able to see outside those scripts. And that's where a lot of like just beautiful sense of liberation, self-direction, empowerment, authenticity, like that's where that juice really lives. So that's like very much what I hope to accomplish with someone as well.
Any thoughts, Tyson, before we pivot to the Q&A?
I think it's a good time to go to some questions.
Cool. So we'll have about 7 minutes of questions because we're going to do an exercise before we close. Let's go with Aaron. Aaron, you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, I like asking difficult questions, but I think this is important, and it's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about too, as I've also considered coaching. How do you filter for people who need, let's say, real therapy? Because coaching can be incredibly helpful, and it can offer someone the tools they wouldn't otherwise have, but some people really have some deep trauma, and they should not be going to someone like me, for instance. They should actually be going to a real licensed therapist. And I'm just wondering, like, what kind of boundaries do you see yourselves like putting in place to kind of filter for this? How might you handle that, et cetera, et cetera?
I have an answer for that. You want to go, Peter?
I was just going to say that is a tough question. So I'm glad that AJ's.
For me, and this is something that I've built into, like when you sign up with a session with me, there's a disclaimer. And what I'm looking for is that you are in a position to come to me and talk about something that you know you can take responsibility for your own well-being in that subject and in that moment. So a therapist I think of as someone who is trained and licensed, where they're like, I'm actually going to hold that space. I'm going to make sure that your well-being is taken care of. Whereas in coaching, I expect a client to come prepared to hold their own well-being. And if you don't feel like you can hold this issue and hold your own well-being, then I'm not the right space for you to explore it. You know, does that kind of, that's the boundary for me anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is something that is a concern for me, and something that I think we might discover more in the future if this thing goes on. The framing, I find coaching helps, coaching in residence. So this is not therapy, this is coaching. And I don't like that term either, coaching, that much. But it's the one that we're like, what do we want to do here for like a one-on-one session to give our gift? So that's the one that seems most common, but I do think it's helpful to kind of like police therapy thing, and then we're clearly indicating what we're here for in our bios, and we're getting more sophisticated with this. We're just 2 weeks into it, but sending emails beforehand just to kind of like test out what this session's about and what maybe they want to talk about. And I'm more than happy of turning someone down if I feel like I'm not equipped to handle it.
I think those were good answers. It hasn't been something that I feel like I've had to really, I don't know, contemplate, or it hasn't been as much of a challenge for me. Maybe the playfulness of my offering. However, there is a sense of like someone's coming into the experience often because of something that they're striving toward, like a greater expression of themselves. Whereas I've had experiences with people in the past where they were coming to me or the experience more of like something that they, wanted to get or avoid that needed to be filled, or there was more of a despair rather than like an enthusiastic reaching. And in those cases, I didn't really feel like I still could introduce the practice, but I didn't feel as well equipped maybe to deal. Like if we open up all this self-expression work and they might start channeling a character or an archetype that is like dormant within them that this sort of practice can come alive, then I would probably advise them to talk to somebody that's like well versed in whether it's like shadow work or different archetypal work, or a psychologist or someone. Like I've seen people practicing self-expression sort of unlock these expressions, characters, things within them that they wanted to go deeper into. I was like, that's awesome. I'm glad that we found something. But I'm not always the best person to like lead them down that path. But it's like, if you want to come and keep doing this practice, it's like, great. Maybe it's, there's something else that they could do that would be complementary. So I feel like I just take that like case by case and be discerning. Yeah.
All right. So let's pivot to another question. I see there's a lot of things about the live player, dead player thing. So maybe just to clarify, it's not a term I necessarily attach to in the coaching practice. I used it here, but I wouldn't use it if someone I would sense they would get triggered by it in a certain way. And I would use it in an aspirational sense, because in the way the term is held is that all dead players, quote unquote, can be transmuted into a live player, depending on the contents and how it's held. But I do think AJ is a good point to watch out for the shamey vibes of certain terms we use. Ron had a question he wants me to read on his behalf, and it's a question that actually I wanted to get to in our talk about the gift economy. So I'll read it. I'm wondering how so far you think this economy model is working, and if you're seeing any downsides or cautions in a pay what you like model after a session. Who'd like to take that one?
You know, if someone said to me, yeah, we're going to do a session and you're going to decide what you're going to pay me, that would bring up a lot of discomfort and shame for me. Because like, well, I want to be a fair amount and I want you to like me, and I want, but I don't want to like give too much. So it brings up a lot of discomfort in me. And I think that's juicy and like, oh, good. Let's talk about the shame that brings up. So I like the model in that sense because it's challenging me, and it even like everyone who comes to see me has this moment where they have to grapple with that uncertainty. And I think that that's great practice. So that excites me. That being said, I think after February, I will probably pivot to a different model because it's unpredictable. And there's, yeah. So I don't know, I'd be curious to try other models at least. I don't know how it's been for Tyson.
Yeah, I can tie in my response as well with Tom's question. Because this has been situated in the gift economy, like I was talking about with that, I feel that permission to experiment more and have a bit more of a nebulous offering and sort of craft my more specific coaching offerings through this. So I'm taking it as an opportunity to learn, which makes me more open to the gift model and willing to take those risks. And there's just lower expectations, I find, in general. That said, there's definitely a challenge that comes up around maybe like a concern of being taken advantage of. Yeah, or me also having the personal experience of, will this make it more challenging to like value my time? Like, am I just going to get used to this model and not get more specific and have clear prices and strong offerings? Will I get a little too comfortable in the nebulous, gifting, vague territory? So that's kind of where I want to, just be aware and hold myself accountable, is when it comes time to maybe have stronger boundaries and all of that, and to push myself to give myself the chance to do that. Yeah.
And one of the discussions that we had at the beginning of this thing is, do we put it in the market economy or do we put it in the gift economy? And we opted for the gift economy, partly for what Tyson said. And the idea is this is a 1 month or 1.5 month experiment to see what happens and pivot. And then maybe this thing stops, maybe it grows. but it's following the MO of the Stoa spirit is safe to fail probes. Let's try things out, see what works, and move forward from there. And to answer Ron's question, yeah, like I said, I have about 10 sessions, and some people have been gifting quite generously after a session. Some people didn't give a gift at all. And just going, like Andrew, the guy that I mentioned, he says, you got to give a gift without expecting anything in return. And he supports his whole livelihood off this thing. He's been doing it for years now. Purchases a home, supports his wife, all off this model and his philosophical practice. And so I think it can be tinkered, and it has to be tinkered more, the collective model of the gift economy here, and maybe the individual approach to make this, support a livelihood in that sense. But it's a wild ride in a way, because you don't know what you're going to get. So I don't know how I'm going to relate with it in the future, but just that kind of unpredictability is a spiritual practice for me, to being in a relationship with that. So I find it quite interesting. So that being said, we're going to close out now, because we have we're almost at the top of the hour, but Tyson has an activity to leave us with. So I will tag Tyson in. I think you need a co-host access or share screen access. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. So we're just going to have a little, we're going to do a fun little experiment to get a taste of freestyle and this form of self-expression. So I'm just going to get a little beat going here, drop us into that. Can y'all hear that beat? Okay, good. So if your video is not on and you would like to participate in this portion, I invite you to turn your video on and just hear the music and just move to it with us. Look at the other heads and bodies in the room and experience some of the funny feelings that come up with being seen, just bobbing your head to the music. We're just gonna take about 15 seconds and enjoy this community grooving. All right, so some of you might have heard of apps, writing apps, where you can't stop writing. And if you do, you'll lose all of your work. And this can be quite helpful in getting us to stream our consciousness and bypass some of those filtering mechanisms that judge every word that we write. So freestyle has been an opportunity for me to practice that with my voice and my words. So we're gonna do a practice with this beat where for 1 minute, you're gonna freestyle. I'm gonna invent a prompt. I don't have one yet, but I'm gonna invent one. And you're just going to speak with the beat. You don't have to rhyme. Don't worry about being too on beat or too rhythmic or too musical. If that's what comes up, great. But the point is that for the entire minute, you just are not gonna stop talking. And we're gonna stay on mute. Peter just messaged me, we will stay on mute, otherwise that would be pretty hectic. And just notice the judgments or the criticisms, or what is it that wants to have you stop or pause, and see if you can just push through that and make basically your only goal is to not stop no matter what you say. Okay. So I'm actually gonna bring us in at a fresh beat here. All right, so if you're ready, I'm gonna prepare a timer. Let's hear the music. The prompt is going to be, the adventure that is calling me, ... All right, so you're gonna start with that. And for 1 minute, I invite you to use your words, your voice, and just don't stop until I say time. Ready? Here we go. Time, you did it. That was 1 minute of nonstop consciousness streaming. Thank you for participating in this little experiment. It's really fun to just see everybody on their screen moving and talking all at the same time. I was really curious what it was sounding like, what y'all were talking about. We have a couple minutes. If anybody does want to share anything about how that went for them, I'd be interested in hearing. Anybody at all?
Cool. I want to do that every day. I was like, I think that was my best freestyle session I've done so far. So I'm going to, I'll keep Tyson's audio on while I close out. So yeah, that's it. That's the launching official launch party of the Coaches in Residence. If you would like to book a session, you can do so at thestoa.ca/coaches. It's going to be for the end of the month. I think AJ and Tyson still have some sessions available. I'm going to open up a few more sessions and I'll announce that on my mailing list. That being said, AJ, Tyson, thank you for being fucking beautiful human beings as always. You can find them at their respective sessions on thestoa.ca. And everyone, thank you for coming to the Stoa today.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Peter.